Rounding. All right, we want to round 123.9 to the nearest 1. Okay, so there's the ones place. Now, really what we're asking is this closer to 123 or 124? So is 123.9 closer to 123 or 124? That's it, right? Well, what place decides? All right, and it's this place. It's the 0.9. It's the 9 here that decides. All right, and that's the tenths place. So the next place in line, the next place to the right, and in this case it happens to be the tenths. All right, now all we have to do is we just have to look at that digit and ask ourselves, where does it fall? Okay, like here's the digits. So here's the top 9. 9 is really close up to the next one, right? And so if it's 9, 8, 7, 6, or 5, we're going to round up. If it's 4, 3, 2, 1, or 0, we're going to round down. Okay, notice there are 5 digits for rounding up and 5 digits for rounding down. Okay? So in this case, it's 9, so we're rounding up. Okay, so that means we're closer to 124 than we are to 123. Okay, and there's our answer, 124. And we chop everything else off. This is, we put zeros until we reach the decimal point, but we're at the decimal point, so there's no need to put any zeros. We don't bother writing the 9, okay, because it's after the decimal place. All right, so the 3 rounds up to a 4. Here we have 248.2, and we're rounding to the nearest 1. Now in this case, we're looking at, is 248.2, is it closer to 248 or 249? Okay, and there's our ones place. We're rounding to the nearest 1. Okay, so we're rounding to the nearest 1, and there's the ones place. So is 248.2 closer to 248 or 249? So the place, which place decides? It's going to be the place right next to this ones place. It's going to be the tenths. Okay, so the next place, in this case, it's the tenths place decides. All right, and we just have to look at the digit and see where it falls. Okay, so if it's 5 or higher, we're going to round up. If it's 4 or lower, we're going to round down. Okay, so it's 2, which is lower, which tells us to round down. All right, so it's closer to 248. We're going to keep the 8 and then fill in any zeros until you get to the decimal point, but we're at the decimal point, and remove any decimals. We have 9,248.2, and they're asking us to round it to the nearest 1,000. Okay, and here's our nearest 1,000. And so what we have to ask ourselves is this number closer to 9,000 or 10,000? Okay, so is 9,248.2 closer to 9,000 or 10,000? All right, and which place decides? All right, we're talking about the thousands place, so it's going to be the hundreds place that decides. Okay, the next place is the hundreds place, that's what's going to decide. Okay, and once again, if it's 5 or higher, we round up. If it's 4 or lower, we round down. Okay, and in this case, it's a 2, so we're going to round down. All right, now by rounding down, I mean we keep the 9, and everything else becomes zeros till we get to the decimal. So 9,000. So keep the 9. All the digits to the right become zeros until you get to that decimal point. Okay, let's look at another one. Here we have 9,998.2, and we're being asked to round to the nearest 10. Okay, there's our tens place. All right, and what we're really asking ourselves is 9,998.2, is it closer to 9,990? Okay, is 9,998.2 closer to 9,990 or to the next 10? The next 10 up, by the way, is going to be 10,000. Okay, and we're going to see why in a second. All right, so which place decides? We're rounding to the nearest 10, so the next place over is going to decide, okay, which in this case is the ones place. All right, the next place, which is the ones place, decides, and that's higher than 5, so we're going to round up. Okay, Okay, remember, if it's 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, we're rounding up. If it's 4, 3, 2, 1, or 0, we're rounding down. Okay, so we're going to round up. Okay, so that 8 is going to tell the 9 to round up, which becomes a 10. Okay, so we're going to have to do some carrying. So let's see what happens. So we're going to round up or round down. In this case, it's an 8, so we're rounding up. Okay, so the question we want to ask ourselves is, what happens to this 9 when we round up to 10? Okay, we're going to have to carry the 1. All right, so what's going to happen is the 8 tells the 9 to become a 10. Okay, this 8 becomes a 0. We don't bother writing the decimal point or the 2. Okay, all right, so this 9 became a 0, and we carried the 1 onto the next 9. So here's the 1 being carried. Okay, so this was a 9. It became a 10, but the 1 got carried. Then the 1 is going to add to this 9, make it a 10. So we're going to end up carrying again, like that. Okay, this 1 is going to add to the 9, and we're going to get 10. So we end up with 10,000. With decimals, so round to the nearest 10th. Here's our 10th place. And our question is 1.6874, is it closer to 1.6 or 1.7? All right, and which place decides that? Well, it's the hundredths place. It's the one right next to it. Okay, it's the next place to the right. The hundredths place decides. All right, and we just have to ask ourselves, is it 5 or higher? And it is in this case. Remember, if it's 5 or higher, we're rounding up. If it's 4 or lower, we're rounding down. Okay, 8 tells us 6 to round it to a 7, and we chop off all the extra decimal places. All right, so it's very important that you remember that the last place we write, the last decimal place we write, is the place that we are rounding to. All right, the place to which we are rounding. All right, and we are rounding to the nearest 10th, so the last decimal place we write is the 10ths place. Let's try another one. So round 99.9999 to the nearest thousandths place. Okay, here's the nearest thousandths. And so what we're asking ourselves is 99.99999 closer to 99.9999 or the next thousandth up. Okay, now this is 9,000, so it becomes a 10,000th. And believe it or not, this all becomes 100. So is it closer to 99.99999 or 100.000? Which place decides? Okay, so we're rounding to the nearest thousandth, so the next one over, which is the 10,000ths, decides. Okay, so the next place to the right, which is the 10,000ths place, decides. All right, and once again, if it's 5 or higher, we round up. If it's 4 or lower, we round down. All right, and in this case, it's a 9, so we're rounding up. So this 9 tells this 9 to become a 10, and we carry the 1 onto this one, and onto this one, and onto this one, onto this one, until we get to here, and it becomes 100. Okay? So let's see how this works. So we're rounding to the nearest thousandth. This 9 tells this 9 to become a 10, and when it does, we carry the 1 to the next 9. That 1 adds to the 9. This becomes a 10, so we have to carry the 1 over to here. Okay, 1 plus 9, 10. So this becomes a 0, we carry the 1 over here. 1 plus 9, 10. This becomes a 0, we carry the 1 over here. 1 plus 9, 10, and so we have a 10. Okay? All right, which makes this into 100. Now remember, since we're rounding to the nearest thousandths place, we have to put our zeros up to the nearest thousandths. We have to show, the last place we're showing is the thousandths place. Okay, the last place we write is the rounding place. In this case, it's the thousandths place. Have a good day.